In the long shadows cast by rebellion, some truths are whispered only in the darkest corners of existence. The tale of the 16th Legion is not merely one of war, but rather it is a chronicle of betrayal, ruin, and rebirth. Once the peerless champions of the Imperium, they were led into damnation by the mightiest of Primarchs, and from the wreckage of their disgrace, a darker, much more raw force emerged. And thus, driven from Holy Terra, they would reside forevermore in the underworld. The Sons of Horus, the treacherous 16th Legion, would become the Black Legion. From shame and shadow, they would be recast, in black and gold reborn. The Lunar Wolves, once designated as the 16th Legion during their formation as one of the original Space Marine Legions, were one of the premier, if not the single greatest, Legion, forged within the crucible of the Great Crusade. Their reputation was forged through relentless conquest and peerless loyalty to the Imperium. Their unmatched martial prowess, alongside their gene-sire, Horus Lupercal, allowed them to rise swiftly within the Emperor's favor. Eventually, their gene-sire would become crowned as Warmaster, making them first amongst equals, as he was now the supreme commander of all Imperial forces. But loyalty breeds expectation, and pride will often cometh before the fall. When the Heresy ignited the catastrophic civil war that sundered the Imperium in twine, it was Horus who stood at the heart, becoming one of, if not the true architect of betrayal, the first and most dangerous of the traitor Primarchs to declare themselves openly as an enemy of the Imperium. Those who followed him into rebellion would become forever marked. Just as the Lunar Wolves had once cast their name aside, so too would they eventually cast aside the title of the Sons of Horus for something far darker, and this would come in the wake of the Horus Heresy, just after his death during the Siege of Terra, which led the Legion to flee into the Eye of Terror, an unstable region of overlapping warp and real space, known for its impossibility to chart and its corrupting influence. There, the Sons of Horus fractured under the weight of their loss, and the madness of the warp did them no favors. This would lead to the so-called Legion Wars, a series of internecine conflicts amongst the traitor legions, scattering their forces further still. One significant moment in their decline was the Battle of Harmony, a conflict that marked the final death throes of their cohesion as a single unified force. What remained of the once proud Legion would be subsumed into new orders, warbands, and cults. Eventually, they would all succumb and fall in line under the leadership of Ezekiel Abaddon, the former first captain of the Sons of Horus. Abaddon did not merely gather the remnants, he reforged them, casting aside the name of their disgraced Primarch, and from the ashes of shame, he raised the banner of the Black Legion. Yet not all bent the knee, as a scattering of warbands chose independence and freedom, refusing to relinquish their old name, their titles, their battle honors. These survivors, remembered and reviled as the thrice cursed traitors, continue to operate under the Sons of Horus identity even to this day. Their motives, allegiances, and numbers remain fluid, as they were never fully absorbed or ever truly erased. Before their fall to chaos, the Lunar Wolves marched under the cry of the Lupercal, or even the oath of for Horus and the Emperor. Their current battle cry, in contrast, is a rather chilling one, as it has become inverted as "Death to the False Emperor." This slogan would carry on to the void winds across the blood-soaked stars of all reality. This, along with the Eye of Horus, a once proud symbol of the Warmaster's command and his allegiance to Terra, would become twisted and perverted, and they now stand as symbols, emblems even, of the Black Legion's eternal war against the Imperium and humanity as a whole, as it still to this day remains one of the most feared insignias across the galaxy, a mark of nigh uncompromising vengeance. The origins of the Legion, at least their culture, can be traced back to Cthonia, a planet so near to Terra that it fell within the grasp of non-warp travel. This was a world stripped bare by millennia of mining. Its surface and the depths of the world were a lattice of tunnels and collapsing spires, a veritable bevy of industrial decay and biological benediction of the environment. Ancient texts suggest that Cthonia had at once exhausted all its resources even before the discovery of Horus, further still than even the Age of Darkness itself. By the time of the Heresy, Cthonia was not but a hollowed husk. In the centuries that followed, the planet's disappearance from imperial records would raise some alarm. Current archives, however, seem to record it as no longer existing. Its geological integrity reported to have been entirely lost. Official accounts attribute this to extreme subsurface mining, which likely pierced its long-dead core. However, there are suspicions and allegations that Chthonia's destruction was not natural, but rather an orchestrated act, its annihilation perhaps intended to sever the final links of Horus's bloodline upon the material world. However, no name has been officially attached to such theories, as no confirmation can be granted. Remarkably, the evidence suggests that even during the Unification Wars, prior to the Primarch's rediscovery, some natives of Cthonia had already made their way back to Terra, joining what would become the first formation of Lunar Wolves. Their influence, though rarely documented, is a haunting footnote in their origins, and one of the Imperium's most impactful interactions prior to the Great Crusade with the wider galaxy.
I never wanted this. I never wanted to unleash my legions. Together we banished the ignorance of old night. But you betrayed me. You betrayed us all. You stole power from the gods and lied to your sons. Mankind has only one chance to prosper. If you will not seize it, then I will. So let there be war from the skies of Terra to the galactic rim. Let the seas boil, let the stars fall. Though it takes the last drop of my blood, I will see the galaxy freed once more. And if I cannot save it from your failure, Father, then let the galaxy burn.
The Black Legion, once known as the 16th Legion of the Legiones Astartes, has borne many names: Lunar Wolves, the Sons of Horus, and now in their final incarnation, the Black Legion. Its origins stretch back to Terra itself, and through its early incarnation, the Legion earned a place of high honor beside the Emperor directly during the Great Crusade. They were lauded as the apex of martial excellence, brutal, unrelenting, and unwavering in their execution of the Emperor's will. Yet these same warriors, once trusted above all others, would become the primary weapon for the Warmaster Horus's attempt to usurp the Golden Throne. As the chosen hand of chaos, the Sons of Horus stood as the vanguard of the Imperium's betrayal. The Heresy would end with their defeat at the Siege of Terra, but their story would not die with the Primarch. After the death of Horus Lupercal, the Sons of Horus fled deep into the warp. Their grief at the loss and their shame for their failure led to the symbolic act of a transformation. Under the leadership of Ezekiel Abaddon, Horus's former first captain, they blackened their once proud warplate in mourning and fury. They erased the name of their fallen Primarch from themselves, and in the form of this self-imposed exile, they were reborn as the Black Legion. This act of renaming stands alone amongst the traitor legions, where others clung to their original designations and their proud histories, refusing to abandon their identities even as they fall deeper and deeper still into damnation. The 16th Legion chose reinvention, rebirth if you will. This was not a mere act of symbolism, it was the foundation of a new era under Abaddon's direct command. They would no longer serve the memory of a dead master. They would forge their own legacy in the name of Chaos Undivided. It is critical to remember, before their fall, the Lunar Wolves stood as the Emperor's favored legion. Following the Lunar Crusade, a campaign in which Horus believed the Imperium's greatest victory had occurred over the Orc Empire, the Emperor himself would go on to propose the renaming of the Sons of Horus, in recognition for Horus Lupercal's showing of brilliance. Horus initially resisted, as it was only after the fateful conversation with his favored brother Primarch Sanguinius and the fallout from a violent clash with the Interrex that Horus reluctantly accepted the honor. This moment marked a turning point and should have been seen as foreshadowing of a pride that would soon turn into rebellion. The final renaming from the Sons of Horus to the Black Legion would only come after they had been utterly and completely defeated, as records state that those both within the Imperium and within Chaos realized that if they had only had 30,000 more Marines on Terra, that the Loyalists would have been able to completely wipe out all the traitor bloodlines after the Heresy had failed. This change came from Abaddon's intent to keep his brothers from wallowing in self-pity and to galvanize them in order to prevent their scattering into obscurity. The change was not only a matter of appearance, but rather of ideology, tactic, and structure. They would now be the sword of vengeance, not merely to avenge Horus, but to bring ruination down upon the Emperor's dream itself. In the 41st millennium, the Black Legion stands not as a scattered group of raiders and squabbling warbands, but as a cohesive, disciplined force. Unlike their traitorous brethren, who often fell prey to infighting and the fragmentary nature of chaos, the Black Legion, on the other hand, stands as a unified force under the banner of Chaos Undivided. Their cohesion is not an accident, but rather a reflection of Abaddon's unyielding will, as he has the strength of iron within. Every time the Black Legion musters in full, it marks the beginning of what is known as a Black Crusade. These campaigns, launched with meticulous planning and precision, unleash relentless fury, and despite what they may seem like, they are not random acts of destruction, but rather deliberate strikes at the Imperium's heart. To this date, these crusades number in the dozens, each one a reminder that the Long War never ended. In the echoes of their past, one sees a paradox that defines the Black Legion. They were once exemplars of the Emperor's vision, disciplined, loyal, and unyielding, but now they are his most dangerous enemy, fanatical, unrelenting, and utterly devoted to his downfall. Their Primarch, Horus, born closest to Terra, was the brightest of the Emperor's sons, and the one who fell the furthest. Today, the Black Legion walks the galaxy, bearing the scars of that very fall, wielding them both as a weapon and a warning. They are inheritors of the greatest victories of the Great Crusade, and the architects of its greatest betrayal. From Terran birth to the Chaos God's newfound favorite, the Black Legion's journey is one of true transformation, one that mirrors the Imperium's own decay. They were not born as traitors, they were made so, step by step, battle by battle, inch by inch, and now Abaddon's forces gather once more. In the shadows of the Imperium's early days, before the truth of the great betrayal would scar 10,000 years of galactic history, there was Cthonia, a world whose riches were stripped bare long before the age of the Imperium. This was one of the first planets truly colonized by mankind. Cthonia would thereby become an open wound of industry, and its hollowed crust riddled with mine shafts, its skyline jagged with rusting hive spires. From this fractured world would emerge Horus Lupercal, the first rediscovered Primarch and the most beloved by the Emperor. Found by the God Emperor himself in the year 801 M30, Horus would grow up amongst the gang warriors of the Chthonian Underhive, where survival was earned not by mere merit but by blood. Birthright did not account for anything in this world. It was there, with these gang-born killers, molded by hardship and bred for violence, that the first waves of the Lunar Wolves Legion would be built upon. And it was from them that Horus drew his earliest warriors, not by gene seed, but by shared brutality. For 3 decades, Horus marched at the Emperor's side, waging war in the nascent Great Crusade. His was a mind honed not just for conquest, but for unification. When the Emperor departed to seek out the rest of his lost Primarchs, it was Horus who was trusted to command the Emperor's vast military. As one by one the scattered Primarchs were found, and their legions reassembled, Horus rose above them, not as a mere commander, but as the commander, the true first amongst equals, a general without peer, where the others mastered a specific craft, discipline, or area of warfare and or governance, be they guerrilla tactics, siegecraft, armored assault, lightning raids, shock assault. Horus garnered a level of mastery within all of them. More importantly, he wielded the loyalty of divergent forces like a sculptor shaped stone. He unified not just soldiers, but cultures, treating each newly encountered world with a calculated respect for its tradition. In doing so, he brought billions into the imperial fold willingly. But this very talent, his ability to bridge human, Terran, and alien alike, may have been what sowed the seeds of damnation within half of humanity's legion. As, following the Lunar Crusade, Horus achieved what none other had, the complete destruction of the largest Orc empire ever known. The Emperor, in recognition, bestowed upon him the title of Warmaster, a rank that meant he was supreme commander of all Imperial military forces, including that of his brothers. The Luna Wolves would then become the Sons of Horus. After this, the Emperor would return to Terra in order to pursue designs known only to him. What followed occurred upon the moon of Davin, a feral world of ancient corruption. There Horus fell, struck down not by blade or bolter, but by a virulent psychic disease crafted by the accursed relic known as the Anatheme, a blade of Nergalite origin capable of infecting even a Primarch. Whether through the fevered dreams of his recovery or deliberate initiation, Horus entered the Temple of the Serpent's Lodge, a warrior cult native to Davin. What was once an insidious social order amongst his soldiers became a conduit for something far darker. The precise moment of corruption remains elusive, but Imperial records agree Horus was deeply changed, and with him the legions followed. The once symbolic warrior lodges spread quickly through the Astartes legions, ostensibly as brotherhoods, but in truth they carried with them a poison that had touched the very Warmaster. Within years, the balance of power within the Imperium had begun to shift, imperceivably, inexorably, and imminently, as Warmaster Horus possessed the loyalty of many of his brothers, and this was accomplished through precise calculation, emotional manipulation, and surgical deception, allowing him to secure the complete loyalty of those closest to him, Mortarion, Angron, Fulgrim, and others. Meanwhile, he deliberately undermined and isolated those who might resist. Rogel Dorn, Reboot Guilliman, and Sanguinius, along with the Lion. Every Primarch found themselves at a crossroads, often due to the inexplicable circumstances they were handed, or strategic misfortunes that conveniently aligned with Horus's ascension. In the aftermath of this subtle corruption and whispered treason, the Warmaster's long orchestrated schemes would finally erupt, with the fires of rebellion burning brightly. The crucible of this would occur on Isfahan III. There, under the guise of quarreling insubordination, Horus virus-bombed the remaining loyalist elements embedded within the traitor legions. Brothers turned executioners, comrades turned to ash. This act was truly monstrous in its scope and triggered an immediate response, as 5 full legions would be dispatched to confront this apparent betrayal. But the truth would become revealed, not on Isfahan III, but rather on Isfahan V. On that blood-soaked battlefield, the trap was truly finally sprung. The initial assault force, comprised of Salamanders, Iron Hands, Raven Guard, would make planetfall, believing that they could bring the wayward Warmaster to justice. Instead, they were cast aside, thrown into a pre-prepared killing field. These 3 legions, later remembered as the Shattered Legions, sought to regroup with their supposed reinforcements in a second wave. But what came next has seared itself into the darkest records of the Imperium's history. The Word-Bearers, the Alpha Legion, and the World Eaters, along with the Iron Warriors, the very brothers that were sent to assist, turned turned their weapons on the Loyalist Three. What followed would become known as the Drop Site Massacre, a calculated betrayal that transformed the battlefields of Isan V into a slaughterhouse, and the true first opening salvos of outright rebellion that was the Horus Heresy. The civil war that followed was a war of utter and complete annihilation, and it spread like wildfire, consuming world after world, star system after star system, entire sectors. The corruption unleashed by Horus and the warrior lodges does not stop at the legions. It penetrated deep into the Imperial army, turning soldier against soldier, fleet against fleet. Even the loyalties of the Imperium's god machines, the Titan Legions, those sacred engines of the Mechanicum, fractured into rival factions. What had once been a unified Imperium now became a house divided, where no world was truly safe and no bond truly sacred. Billions upon billions would perish in the years that followed, and always the shadow of Horus loomed larger than life. As the traitor forces surged across the stars, Loyalist legions, not trapped or destroyed, made their way through the warp, converging on Terra itself. Their objective was to defend humanity's cradle and the Emperor's final bastion. As the traitor hosts encircled the Imperial Palace, a final confrontation would become inevitable. In one last act of manipulation, or perhaps a desperate challenge, Horus lowered his shield upon the battle barge, and the Emperor, accompanied by a cadre of his most trusted custodians, Constantine Valder, Sanguinius, Rogaldorn, along with a small contingent of custodians, all teleported upon the vengeful spirit, intending on ending the conflict at its source. The duel that would follow was the stuff of legends. Brother against brother, then father against son, loyalty against ambition, divinity against damnation. When it ended, Horus lay dead, his soul eliminated by the Emperor himself. Yet victory did not come without an unbearable cost. The Emperor, mortally wounded, was entombed upon the Golden Throne, a machine of necro-arcane design that alone would keep him alive in a state just shy of death. As Rogaldorn carried his shattered form back to Terra, the traitor forces began to retreat, as in the midst of this, the 9th Legion had completely lost itself and become ravenous beasts that overwhelmed even the great Abaddon the Despoiler himself. This led the traitor forces to retreat in a confused and panicked state. Somehow, Horus's body had been truly reclaimed by his legion. Fleeing into the Eye of Terror, the Sons of Horus made their way to their new home upon a twisted world that would serve both as a fortress and a tomb. But without their Primarch, the Legion faltered. They turned one by one to the Chaos Gods, seeking the strength that they had lost, seeking belonging, as they embraced demonic possession and the cruel bargains of the thrice damned craven gods. However, their suffering had only just begun. During the savage infighting of the so-called Legion Wars, the Emperor's children launched a daring raid, intent on stealing the corpse of Horus. Their motives to this day remain unclear, but it is believed that Fabius Bile sought genetic samples in order to clone each of the Primarchs, and at least in this it is believed that he intended to form a new Warmaster, one that would succeed where the first had failed. What was certain was that it was not until the intervention of Ezekiel Abaddon, Horus's most formidable captain, that the Legion's fate had changed. Abaddon led a brutal assault upon the Emperor's children, destroying the body of their Primarch and symbolically severing the path. With this act, he ascended to new heights as the leader of Legion, in particular after having slain a clone of him, then donning the claws that had already slain one Primarch. Under Abaddon's ruthless command, they would be reborn, not as relics of failure, but as avatars of vengeance. The long war had now begun, an eternal campaign to complete the work of Horus, to burn the Imperium to its bones, and to cast the Emperor down once and for all. Across millennia, their war bands have gathered time and time again under the banner of the Despoiler, with a goal that yet remains unclear. When the Emperor first cast his gaze beyond the confines of Terra, he did so with intent, not of exploration, but of domination. As the Great Crusade was born in the Wake Unification Wars, he forged new armies, not merely from loyal Terran stock, but from the conquered and broken. Amongst these earliest instruments were the conquered that stood as the 16th Legion, those who would later bear the name Lunar Wolves. The 16th Legion was seeded with warriors drawn from almost every speck of soil on Terra. From the outset, the recruitment was as pragmatic as it was ruthless. Many hailed from bleak industrial underworld such as Samistan subplate slums or the brutal survivalist enclave of the Jutagran Bowl. These individuals were hardened by deprivation and living on the edge of extinction. Feral survivors shaped by violence, deprivation. It was precisely this crucible that forged men suitable enough for the Emperor's gene implantation process. Implanted with a genetic legacy of their lost Primarch Horus Lupercal, the early 16th Legion displayed an almost instinctual aptitude for calculated aggression. Their battlefield doctrine was defined not by attrition or siegecraft, but by velocity and terminal impact. Where diplomacy faltered or resistance was expected, the Lunar Wolves would be the ones who struck first. If there was ever a hammer in the Emperor's arsenal, it was the Lunar Wolves, but they were also quite capable of being scalpels, executioner blades, and on occasion messengers. Imperial accounts are fragmentary, but as they cite the first pacification of Luna being the clearest demonstration of the Legion's capabilities. The moons of Terra did not yield through negotiation, but rather through a show of overwhelming unrelenting force. The Lunar Wolves made the residents of Luna yield through shock, brutality, and precision. The victories against the Crolincious enclaves and the Fire Winter left scars on Terran society, so deep that even now, millennia later, the ancient numerical 16 is whispered among those of the Corporatin Sinks under the epitaph, the Counting of the Wolf. Contemporary testimonies from that era, few though they may be, describe the arrival of the 16th Legion as indistinguishable from divine wrath, descending upon a bevy of stormbirds, storm eagles, and drop pods, escorted by screaming passage of lightning claws. They struck in the half-light of dawn or under the cover of night. Often, they were already face to face with their enemy before the echoes of the first volleys had faded. The attack itself was not merely physical, it was psychological, a calculated move in order to ensure that resistance would break as soon as possible. The warriors who made up this legion matched the ferocity of their doctrine. They were cold, proud, displaying little patience or want of ceremony, mysticism, or even camaraderie with the mortal elements of the Imperial army. They were not human soldiers in any recognizable sense, but a creation apart, post-human, entities bred for conquest and honed for violence, governed by the iron restraint of purpose. Their command structure, devoid of unnecessary ritual or affection, thrived on merit, decisiveness, and lethal clarity. They asked for no quarter, and they gave none. Yet despite this fearsome disposition, it was control, not chaos, that defined them in the early days. The aggression that seethed within each and every one of them, chained directly and released only to serve the Imperium's needs. In this, they reflected the intent of their sire, that war was not something to indulge in, but rather an instrument. The 16th Legion would then become legends, long before they became traitors. They were born in blood, shaped by Terra's unforgiving underworlds, and unleashed to bring a galaxy to heel. And though the echoes of their fall would one day ring across the skies, at some point, when exactly none can say, the image of the Emperor dispatching his wolves in order to break his enemies and those too stubborn or dangerous to be brought to heel by lesser means took hold in the collective imaginations of the Imperium. Though difficult to pinpoint the precise origin, most chronicles trace the concept to a singular flashpoint, the pacification of Luna. It was an operation launched even as the Unification War was still raging across Terra, a campaign considered by Imperial scholars to be the first true battle of the Great Crusade. Whether that claim is literal or symbolic remains a matter of debate. What cannot be disputed, however, is that Luna, Earth's sole moon, had become a site of conflict that would mark the coming of a new epoch. At the time, Luna was controlled by a confederation of gene cultists, resurrectionist sects that operated in subterranean complexes, honeycombing the moon's entire interior. These cults, known collectively as the Selnar cult, were no ordinary opposition. Their belief system was a complex interwoven series of systems which remained internally coherent, grounded in a conviction that humanity was simultaneously fragmented and transcendent. Each cult followed a unique archetype, its members engineered and resurrected repeatedly time and time again by gene rights, using technology whose origins lay deeply forgotten due to the loss of the sciences of the Dark Age of technology. They sought nothing less than utter perfection of human archetypes. To the nascent Imperium, their belief and their stubborn refusal to accept the imperial truth rendered Selenar unacceptable. Under normal circumstances, the Emperor's response to such defiance would be immediate and absolute obliteration. But the situation on Luna was not normal. The Selenar possessed something the Imperium needed. Though the details of what it is remain heavily redacted within the Imperial archives, it is evident that their knowledge on genecraft and recursive human regeneration presented a valuable tool too great to be destroyed outright. And so, when the envoys for Alliance were met with silence, and threats were soon returned with resistance, the final decision would be made. Luna would not be negotiated with any longer. It would be pacified. To accomplish this, the Emperor deployed a coalition of 3 newly forged Legionis Astartes, who would later be known as the Imperial Fists, the Ultramarines, and the Luna Wolves. Amongst them, the Luna Wolves had been chosen to spearhead the assault, and they would bring the full strength of their legion to bear. Cutting power to their voidcraft, the warriors of the 16th Legion would allow their assault vessels to drift silently towards the moon, as if they had been loosened arrows, while the Selenar surface batteries focused their fire upon the more conventional approach of the Ultramarines and the Imperial Fists. The Luna Wolves struck from the shadows, unexpected and unseen. There, the impact would be devastating, as within 6 hours of the first engagement, Luna had been subjugated and fully pacified. The Selenar defenses were shattered. The surviving cultist leaders faced extinction, and so they would transmit their complete surrender. The message was simple, but it was an echo, one that would reverberate throughout Imperial history. Call off your wolves. From that moment on, the 16th Legion had earned a name that would outlast empires, the Luna Wolves. The iconography they would adopt in the aftermath of this was one that mirrored this very same name, that of the ancient predators of old Earth, extinct for millennia, which had only survived as biostock for gene-forged beasts and half-remembered symbols of Terran dialects, where wolf had come to dignify lethal control of discipline and savagery. It was a name they would wear with pride. The Selenar, meanwhile, who survived, were bent to the will of the Imperium. Their advanced genetic methodologies were harnessed and directed towards a new purpose for the refinement of the Legionis Astartes. From the ruins of their failed defiance, they would help shape the next generation of Space Marines, and thus Luna became the first off-world conquest of the Imperium of Man and the 16th Legion. The wolves who struck without warning, without mercy, had begun their long and dark descent into legend. In the wake of the pacification of Luna, the 16th Legion, soon to be known as the Luna Wolves, emerged not as the blade of the Emperor, but also as an image unto themselves. A symbol began to solidify across their ranks. Field commanders and officers increasingly adorned themselves with pelts of enhanced canine predators, gene-forged beasts reminiscent of Terra's long-dead predators. Though several legions would come to adopt similar feral canine motifs, it was the Luna Wolves who did so first. But perhaps more significant was where the legion would draw its recruits from when beyond Terra. The world was called Cthonia, once a thriving mining hub and one of Terra's nearest systems. Cthonia had long since passed into obsolescence, located within Segmentum Solar and reachable by sublight travel even prior to the invention of warp drives. It had been among humanity's earliest expeditionary colonies, but centuries, perhaps millennia, of relentless excavation had stripped it bare, its crust hollowed out, its surface broken and unstable. The planet itself had become a dying relic, a wasteland of abandoned catacombs and dying machine factories, along with long exhausted resource veins. What remained of human civilization on Cthonia had adapted, or rather devolved, into something harsher. It was a feral world in all but name, built upon the decaying remnants of land once prosperous. Massive hive cities clung to the shell of the world like tumors, home to violent gangs, locked embarked in endless warfare over territory, honor, and survival. It was from these brutal killing gangs that Luna began to draw its aspirants, the youths of Cthonia. Hardened by the world's merciless conditions, they were the ideal stock for the Astartes transformation, aggressive, cunning, and already familiar with violence as a language of power. And it would also be here that the Emperor found his first son, Horus Lupercal.